What I've done is just reposition myself here in the back of the church. I think we should get maximum mileage out of the church from the back before we start moving to other locations here. So we had Megan down the center aisle. That looked really, really cool. But I thought from this direction right here, again, we have all these arches, all the stained glass, all the pillars and everything else here. So maybe this could make just a very, very great location for our groom here. Now, of course, we may bring the bride into this photograph as well. But I think this is a location number 2 that we really want to discuss. I've switched out my lens to my wide angle again. I'm using a 10 to 22 millimeter lens. I'll tell you what focal length I'm on once I get it framed up. But I'm going to ask Christian just very comfortably. And another thing that I find when I have gentlemen really position themselves for the photograph is they got their hand here, just cross the ankle over slightly, and it just kind of creates just the proper balance on their feet that just has them feel, I think, a bit more comfortable when we're taking a photograph. So, Christian, I think that looks pretty good. Good. And now again, I'm going to have to find my spot about where I want his head to be relative to the background. What I'm kind of working here with is I'm really working with all these stained glass windows up here, and I don't want them to be growing out of his head. So I'm going to take a high enough position to be sure that they're well above his head and not intersecting his head, or I'm going to go a low enough position that he will be blocking some of the stained glass. So I'm going to look through the camera and just see how it frames up here for me. So my tendency is to be right about here, but I got stained glass window growing out of his head. If I drop a little bit lower, I think that looks better. And now I'm just going to direct Christian chin down just a bit. Turn your head just a fraction here. Just kind of relaxed and comfortable. Aaron, I'm going to check that our lighting's looking good. We're good. Okay, I'm going to go wide here. Fire away. Come up just a little higher and maybe put the stained glass window over his head here. We got the pillars leading into him on the right-hand side. And let's see what we got. And I think we got some nice stuff happening here in the viewfinder. The pillars leading into one side, the rest of the church center aisle leading the other side. I think that's working pretty well. The one thing I wanted to mention, though, and Aaron, I'm going to let you do this. Let me move Christian over this way, Christian this way a bit more. And what's important for you when you're working with your assistant is to be sure that the assistant, when they're holding the off-camera flash, is that they don't line up the subject with the pillar behind. If they do that, what's going to happen is they're going to throw a shadow from the subject, from our groom, onto that pillar. So you have to know that your assistant needs to know that they're not just standing there holding a light. What they're standing there holding a light, putting it in the direction that you want it to come in from, and again, not be casting any ugly shadows on the background. So I've got Kristen just kind of getting comfortable there. And Aaron, I'm going to ask you to do the big no-no and throw his shadow on that pillar, which means that she's going to see him in front of the pillar. The light will reach him, but then he's going to be shadowed on the pillar. So let's go ahead and we'll just do that quickly here. And so now when we take the photograph and now we look at it, you can see that we got the ugly shadow hitting the pillar here. I don't want to deal with that in Photoshop. Way too much of a hassle for me. So again, be sure that your assistant is heads up enough to know that they're not throwing any nasty shadows on any areas that might be included in the composition. And when I'm using wide angles like this, I'm pretty wide. By the way, the focal length that I was using for those different photographs was anywhere from 12 to about 14 millimeters there. And again, I'm just kind of zooming back and forth till I got the composition that I want. Before we move to another location, let me talk to you about one more problem area that you might encounter. When we look at the scene right here, we have all these pillars leading right up to Christian here in our composition. I've moved Aaron to the right-hand side because that's how I think the light needs to be coming in. But when we take this photograph, here's what I want you to notice. Take the photograph, I'm including the pillars in the composition, and when I look at the image, what's happened? Not only have we lit up the groom, but we've also lit up that big pillar over here. Maybe that's easier to Photoshop, or maybe it's easier to fix in Lightroom and so forth, but be aware of that things that are as closer to the light, Aaron's light if you will, then the subject are going to light up as well. Really the only way to avoid that happening is have Christian turn the other way, the way we had him originally, and bring the light in from the other side. So keep that in mind. Let's see how your surrounds light up depending on the direction that you bring the light in from.